meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell! Give 'em a hand! And let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. Come on and meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town, of New York town.
And we are live, Mets and baseball fans. Shout out to all of you just chiming in now, either in the live stream or watching on replay for another episode here at New York Mets Talk. And I'll be by myself again today. Richie unfortunately had to cancel last minute, but no worries. We have a lot to discuss in today's episode after, another series loss, a brutal series sweep in a 2-game set in Boston against the Red Sox. I was in attendance for that first game with the 7-line army, so I'm going to be sharing my personal experience being in Boston for the first time, experiencing Fenway and how awesome that was, even though the Mets unfortunately lost in the end, and really breaking down a little bit further on the series, just recapping it again. We don't have to go too deep into these at this point. The season is over for the Mets when it comes to playoff hopes. They're 79 on the season at this point with 10 games left, 8 games back of first place of the Braves, and way out of place when it comes to the wild card. So the Mets season is officially over when it comes to playoff hunt, and that's been the case for a while now. But there's still a lot to break down here with the series. Also looking at the upcoming Brewers series starting tomorrow, Friday, at the time of recording this. And also just getting into what are the injury updates, the statuses of guys like Noah Syndergaard, Jacob deGrom. Are we going to see them pitch at all this year? Is it important for them to pitch at all this year? And everything in between, while taking questions from you guys too. So shout out everybody for chiming in, guys. Really appreciate it. Gerald, great member on the channel. Tyler, how's it going? Brandon, what's up, my man? Isaac, Dave, and Cindy, all of you that are just chiming in. I appreciate you all. And like I said, I will be taking questions towards the end, like I usually do, of course. But there will probably be more of an open Q&A here, because there's a lack of things to discuss as we're in that limbo right now where we're not in the offseason yet. We all want to be there. We want to get ready for what is going to be a hectic upwards of 5 months, really upwards until next spring of 2022, with the Mets being, in my mind, what I tweeted out earlier today, if not the busiest, then one of the busiest teams this offseason, with so much that they need to figure out. Roster, who to keep, who to trade, get rid of, not sign to a new contract, who to trade for, who to sign in their favor, and also before that, figuring out who's going to be the president of baseball operations, who's going to be their manager, assuming it's not Rojas, who's going to be their GM, assuming it's not Zach Scott, and all that stuff. So I see Melinda, how's it going? Thank you so much for being here. Let's see. You say the Mets season came crashing to a close on Friday. Yes. Again, it's been that way for a while, though. I was prepared, especially after that series sweep to the Cardinals. It really felt like, you know what, that's all she wrote. The Cardinals really haven't lost it all since then. They're going to be making that wild card more than likely. I think they have an over 97% chance, when they were at a very small window when it came to percentage wise in the beginning of September. So Cardinals have went on a run. Mets have continued to free fall here, but no less, they're going to be breaking it all down. So getting into the Red Sox series, guys, this was another tough one. Again, I know a lot of Mets fans that have been following the channel all year long, following the pod that we do after every series. Haven't been following as much anymore because, you're just not interested. You're ready for the offseason to begin. I don't blame you, but I will say I had these tickets already pre-planned personally going months ago in the middle of September when the 7-line dropped tickets to go to Boston Fenway with upwards of 1,400 other Mets fans all together. It was absolutely electric. I had so much fun, and shout out to everybody that said, congrats for being there. And I actually got to meet a bunch of you guys too. The fact that I had a lot of you guys coming up to me when I was in Boston, no less, recognizing me, asking for photos, really warmed my heart. And I can't begin to tell you just how much it all means to me. I wouldn't be in the position I am right now if it wasn't for everyone watching that's been supporting the channel. So it's always a surreal feeling to me that people come up to me, recognize me, and want to take photos. I'm like, I don't know why you want that, but clearly I'm doing something right. So I really appreciate every single one of you. Shout out to everybody also coming in the chat right now. That means a lot, guys. But getting into the Red Sox series, look, I did not have high hopes going into this one after how the Mets have really just derailed not just the entire second half of the season after the trade deadline, but really in September. They just have not played good baseball at all. They really look like that they have waved the white flag, if you will, from how they've been performing on a day-to-day basis. And Luis Rojas, the Mets manager, hopefully soon to be not. Again, nothing personal with Rojas, but changes need to be made. It's the same shtick every single day after another game in the post-game presser. But getting into this one, I would say before we get into the actual scores, I want to share a little bit about my experience. So again, welcome back from Boston. Thank you so much, Subway to Shea, guys. Also, please make sure to check out the Subway to Shea podcast. My good friend Anthony, he's been on the channel before. He's co-hosted this with me in New York Mets Talk. He'll be on the channel again. He has a great podcast and a great follow on Twitter. So please make sure to check him out. Great members and Ghostway here in Sandy. What's up? Happy to have all you guys in here. And I appreciate the kind words, everybody. So getting in now, I want to show you guys, if you haven't seen it on my Twitter already, just a little bit more of my experience, sharing some, because I think you all will enjoy it. So give me 1 second. Let's share this right now, because I think you guys are going to get, some enjoyment out of this what has otherwise been, not a fun stretch for the Mets. So here I have on Twitter from when I was in Fenway, just electric. I got to say, I absolutely love Boston, first and foremost. It was so much fun being there. This was my first time in Boston ever in my life, and it definitely won't be my last. It was so crazy to me being there. It was a 5-hour drive, which again wasn't terrible. And I just love the entire environment there. It's very old school, as I kind of imagined, of course, but everyone just felt so welcoming. And I love the fact that once you're around Fenway Park, you can really gather and do whatever you want. You put your ticket in when you're still on the street. It's not like you're scanning your ticket scan going into the stadium. No, you still have like a whole block, and you can go around Fenway and check out whether it's restaurants, breweries they have, in which the 7-line, we all met up for a pregame there, which was a lot of fun a couple hours before. But if you guys haven't been to Boston before, I highly suggest you do, and definitely try to do it with the 7-line again if the opportunity presents itself in the future. Again, I can't begin to tell you how much I enjoyed it. Just tried a lobster roll, of course, it was fantastic. We got to check out from the Green Monster. I did not sit there, but it was really, really surreal being in this ballpark. If you guys don't know, Fenway Park is the oldest ballpark in all baseball. Originally, created, I believe, around 1912, early 1910s. And then it's basically been almost demolished down fully, just all rebranded and figured out. And it's been, reestablished over the years to make sure that it's suitable. But the fact that this thing has so much history, you could really feel it as soon as you walked in there. The air hits you, and it's a completely different vibe in Fenway. Here I am, Taiwan Walker's doing some autographs. We're going to talk about Taiwan in today's stream. Not so much positive, but trying to get to an understanding as to why he has unfortunately struggled so much in the second half this year. Didn't get his autograph because he was busy helping others here, but it was really, really cool. Here's myself really almost on the field because of how low they have it in right field for the Red Sox. Really, really cool experience. Stroman warming up to Nito and all that fun stuff. And then here's me doing the chant. He struck him out with the 7-line. Here is some pregame fun in the Cheeky Monkey Brewery right outside of Fenway Park. Again, such a fun experience. So I highly suggest, one more time for the people in the back, if you have not been to Boston before, highly suggest you do to go to the game. I will definitely be doing it again. I cannot begin to tell you all just how great of an experience that was. But now getting back into what actually happened in that game, that wasn't nearly as fun as the experience in my mind. And like I said, guys, I'll be answering a lot of your questions, comments, and concerns throughout the stream and towards the end of our segment. I'm also going to get some background music back in here for you guys, so I hope you enjoy that. Just adds a little, I don't know what you want to call it. Just adds a little fun to it. But Mets went in to the first game against Boston. They got off to an early lead, which was definitely nice, but unfortunately it did not last. So the Mets got off to an early 2-0 lead in their game one against Boston, but that's really all she wrote. They scored 2 runs in the top of the 4th, and then Boston scored 1 run in the bottom of the 4th to cut it even. Marcus Stroman didn't have his best outing in Boston. Unfortunately, he even said after the game his mechanics were just a little off. Stroman ended up giving up, a decent amount of runs, nothing crazy. He gave up 4, so it was just a little over his average of right around 2.88 on the season. But Mets were up by 1 after the 4th. Then Boston unfortunately tacked on three runs in the 5th, 2 more in the 6th, and then the Mets scored once in the 8th, but that's all she wrote for the game. So the Mets lost game 1 of this 2-game stint 6-3. Offensively, the production came from guys like Brandon Nimmo was 1 for 5 in the game. Francisco Lindor was 1 for 3 with a run scored and a walk. Javi Baez was 1 for 4 with a run scored. Pete Alonso 1 for 3 with a run scored and an RBI. He had a home run, the first of 2 that he had in the series. Michael Conforto was 1 for 4, including an RBI single. Kevin Pillar was 1 for 3. James McCann, the wrong catcher, right? James McCann had himself a 1 for 4 day. And Dom Smith, Tomas Nido was 1 for 4. McCann had a pinch hit single in the 9th. But that's all she wrote. Pitching-wise, Stroman gave up 4 runs over 5 innings pitched. 7 hits he surrendered 2 walks, 3 strikeouts, 2 home runs given up, and he now has a 3 even ERA on the year. Again, he's been the most consistent pitcher for the Mets all year long, given injuries to DeGrom among others. Miguel Castro, 0.2 innings pitched, did not have a good outing. Got rocked right away, gave up 2 runs and only 2 outs that he recorded. Brad Hand came in, gave up a hit, but that's it. And then Heath Hembree had the final inning for the Mets. Final 2 innings, he pitched 2 scoreless. But yeah, the Mets lost this one. I'm not really going to gripe about runners in scoring position, all this stuff. We're at a point in the year, guys, where, look, the Mets this is it. This is their season. They are not going anywhere. They're not making playoffs. They just need to grind out the final 10 games they have. It would have been nice to see them win in attendance here, but again, it's not something I was betting on. Boston, of course, has a lot of big hitters that showed up in this series, with Kyle Schwarber being the most notable, just because he's been a Met killer all season long during his time both in DC and now with the Red Sox. But before I go further, I just want to say shout out everybody first chiming in to the episode. Blacklist Outdoors, how's it going, my friend? Looking more in the comments here. Give me 1 second, everybody. And Sandy, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Toxic much? Master, what are you referring to? Just going through here again. Appreciate everybody that's just chiming in. But yeah, this was a rough loss for the Mets. I was really excited early to see the Mets get off to a 2-0 lead, but then it fell short right in the bottom of that inning where Boston was able to cut it within 1, and then they just kept tacking on run after run after run. They got some clutch hits. Xander Bogaerts absolutely killed it as well. He had himself a good game, and like Bogaerts, Schwarber, Kike Hernandez got on the board. Bobby Dahlback, their young first baseman, had a very good game in this one. Jose Iglesias continued his hitting streak with the Red Sox since being picked up by the Angels, I believe. Vasquez, their catcher, also had an RBI. So there was a lot of people contributing for the Red Sox, not nearly enough for the Mets, unfortunately. What's up, Slayer? How's it going, my man? What a tough series against the Red Sox. Yeah, I think that's an understatement. So we're going to kind of breeze by this. We're not going to deep dive too much in the Red Sox series just because it's a broken record at this point. What's up, Yoshima? Happy to have you in here. But now getting into game 2, and fortunately, I did not watch every second of this game yesterday. It was over before it started for the Mets, unfortunately. Boston got off to a quick 2-0 lead in the game yesterday at the time of being live here. Then the Mets scored 1 run in the top of the second to make it a 1-run ball game, but then 4 more runs score against Taiwan Walker. And he ends the day not even going past 2 innings, giving up 6 runs. And Walker has had a polar opposite, really a Jekyll and Hyde season from the first half pre-All-Star game to post-All-Star game in which he was in attendance. He was the lone player representing the Mets because Jacob deGrom decided not to go, so they opted for Walker to go, and he was deserving at the time, giving his numbers. And he went, and Walker just has not been the same pitcher the second half whatsoever. He's been one of the worst starters in baseball, unfortunately. And then 3 runs were scored in the 3rd by Boston, another run scored in the 4th. Both teams scored a run in the 5th. Both teams scored a run in the 6th. And the Mets scored the final 2 runs of the game in the 7th and the 9th. But still, the Mets got blown out here in game 2, 12-5, 14 hits for the Red Sox and 11 hits for the Mets. Only 5 runs scored and a couple bad errors. And yeah, offensively, it was a Kyle Schwarber show for the Red Sox. Went 3 for 4. 4 runs, demolished the Mets the entire game, had 2 home runs. And now Kyle Schwarber, get ready for this, folks. He has not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. He has 9 home runs in only 10 games against, yes, the Mets this year. Splitting both time with the Nationals and with the Red Sox. He has just been a Met killer. And you have to wonder if the Mets are going to have interest in him should he become a free agent, because I know that there is a mutual option between both himself and the Red Sox at the end of the year. If say he wants to hit free agency, he will definitely be a viable DH option / first base for a lot of teams out there that are looking at a guy who's had a great year with pop in his bat, that besides his injuries has been absolutely killing it. But Mets offensively, they did get production, just not nearly enough. Pete Alonso hit his 35th home run of the year last night, which was great to see. He had home runs in back-to-back games in this series. Brandon Nimmo was 2 for 5 in this one with a run scored. Pete Alonso, again, 1 for 5 with a run scored thanks to that home run of an RBI. Francisco Lindor went 2 for 4 with an RBI and a walk yesterday. Javi Baez was 1 for 2 with a run scored and a walk. Again, Javi continues to get walks, folks. We'll take that. He has the same amount of walks as he does strikeouts over his past 2 weeks of play, which is so mind-boggling for a guy who's had one of the worst play approaches in baseball up until he got traded to the Mets, right? Luis Guillorme was 0 for 2, but did have an RBI. JD Davis had a run scored and a walk. Jonathan VR 1 for 4 in this game. Jeff McNeil had a good game, 2 for 4 with an RBI and a single hits apiece from both Pilar, who won 1 for 3, and James McCann, who won 1 for 2 with an RBI, run scored and a walk. So pitching wise, again, Taiwan, 2 innings pitched, 6 hits, 6 earned runs given up, 2 walks, only 1 strikeout for Taiwan those 2 innings. Now has a 4.57 ERA on the year after giving up not 1 but 2 home runs in those 2 innings. Trevor Williams came in relief and did not look good either, unfortunately. It didn't really matter too much, but again, not great outing from him. He gave up 4 runs over 4 innings, including 8 hits and 6 runs total, but only 4 were earned, a walk and 4 strikeouts. Dries Family came in, and so did Brad Hand to close out the game in the final 2 innings. Scoreless innings pitch from both of those players. But in a nutshell, this is definitely a series that we're not going to remember for us Mets fans. I will, just because I was in attendance again with that game with the 7 line for the first game of the series, and I will definitely go back to Boston again. Cannot begin to tell you guys how much I absolutely love being there. But yeah, it was a rough one. There's nothing play from the series other than, you know, if you guys still are unfortunately still under the optimistic side, which is what I was having for the majority of the year, if you still are with any chance on playoffs, guys, I'm telling you right now, just do yourself a favor, just end it, okay? Because the Mets have 10 games left this year. They basically need to win out to have any hope on playoffs, and even that's a stretch. So it's safe to say the Mets are definitely not making playoffs this year. The season's done with when it comes to actual playoff hopes, but now we can really get set and look forward to just the remainder of the year. I'm still looking forward to games, watching these games. I'm looking forward to breaking down the Brewers series, just see how the Brewers are going to do, because they've been such a dominant team this year. If they're going to continue to wipe the floor this time with the Mets, or the Mets could squander at least 1 win in this upcoming series starting tomorrow on Friday in the 3-game set. But I'm going to miss baseball more than anything. I think I made that evident with a lot of people. And again, I see a lot of comments. I'll be getting them very soon, guys. Thank you for being in the chat. If you're watching this live, not a replay, regardless, continue to smash that like and subscribe button. And if you're enjoying this episode of New York Mets Talk, but I'm going to miss baseball more than anything. I think that's the biggest blow from this year. Not just, falling below expectations as an understatement, with anything and everything that could have went wrong for this team this year going wrong. I feel like a broken record, but I'm going to continue to say it. I'm sure I will, basically up until next season begins, and even then some. Endless injuries first half of the year, more injuries than any other team in baseball this season, more wins above replacement lost by a single team than any other club in baseball this year. Then you get on to the second half woes, just Jacob deGrom being out, pitching becoming more consistent, the bullpen gained a little bit more tax than they should, because you don't have enough depth in that rotation from endless injuries earlier in the year. Guys that were hurt this year that unfortunately cannot get into a role that they normally could, with guys like Jeff McNeil, Michael Conforto, etc., having a complete lack of approach when it comes to how to hit with runners in scoring position. The Mets still being a bottom feeder in the league in that category. We all know major changes are going to be had, but still, I'm going to miss baseball. I had so much fun attending games this year. I do intend to go to the final game, home game of the year, against the Marlins September 30th with the 7 line. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, it's bittersweet in the sense of I'm excited for the offseason. I'm prepared for it. I know that great things are going to happen, and you all should be ready. This is going to be offseason to remember for the Mets, and hopefully one that isn't just better than last offseason that was as hectic as it was, but one that's drastically going to make a difference for this club, especially with who they start, what hires they put in to make the right decisions when it comes to what players are going to put on the roster, who's going to come in upper management. That's going to be huge for the Mets, not now, but going forward. But even though this is bittersweet, I'm excited. I hope you guys are too, but I will be missing baseball for sure. So before I get into the Brewers series, I'm going to just look at some of your comments here that are chatting in the live stream. Again, thank you guys for being here. Lindor's rubbing off on Javi, and I like it. Yes, he absolutely is. If you guys haven't seen, there was a yesterday pregame before the game started between Boston and the Mets. Lindor was asked if he thinks that, Cohen can afford to bring Javi Baez back and make them stay together. And he was, kind of with a smirk on his face laughing, saying yes, of course. And he's 100% right. With everything going wrong with the Mets this year, it could be easy for a casual fan to overlook what has happened and what Steve Cohen has done as owner. But let's not forget the value that this man brings to the club and how much he can single-handedly change his team for the better, not just now, but in the years going forward. I've loved so many of the moves that the Mets made going into the season. I love the Javi Baez acquisition as it was at the trade deadline. Now they need to worry about who are they going to re-sign come the offseason. After they do that, of course, figuring out who are they going to add on to this roster and make it better than what it was last year to get themselves to win the division, which is what they should have done this year. But again, everything derailed in the second half. What's up, Hayden? How's it going? We have to make big moves this offseason, says Blacklisted. You're absolutely right. Resign Baez and land a legit third baseman. Not to mention a new damn skipper. Rojas got to go. Yeah, I agree with you. And again, I think all those things are really going to happen. I stand by that. We have to buckle down and get better this offseason. I agree with you, Trevor. The Philadelphia Phillies are fighting for first. They are, Melinda, but again, the Phillies, I will be pretty surprised if they can somehow, some way win that division. I don't see it happening. I still believe the Braves are the team to beat, and for good reason. They're just a team that you can actually believe, considering they've won the division for multiple years now, that they can get themselves in a comfortable spot and actually maybe have some type of run. I don't expect the Braves to go far this year, but again, all they've done is surprise people in recent years. Even with the injuries they've had this year, Adam Duvall, Jorge Soler, even Eddie Rosario to a certain extent, all the guys they added at the trade deadline are benefiting them and then some. They've done a fantastic job with those moves. You feel Carlos Beltran deserves a chance as manager? Yeah, I don't blame you for feeling that. Again, that's something that I think is going to be a very interesting topic heading into the offseason. If his name does arrive more than just strictly rumors, but actually hearing if the connection once again starts to pick up, that'll be very interesting. Definitely need baseball in my life. I find myself watching old games on YouTube. Yeah, it really does be like that sometimes, and that's the biggest bummer. As much as I love the offseason and what it brings for the Mets, knowing that they're going to be active, they're going to be beyond active, they're going to make great moves, I'm sure, and I'm really excited to discuss them. And I'm already doing prep work for the offseason as we speak. I should have a video coming out very soon on things regarding the offseason, which I'm very much looking forward to. But yeah, having no baseball, for 5 months or whatever it's going to be is still definitely not fun in my mind. I think most of us can attest to that, even though that this is definitely a season that we can live to forget for sure. Hopefully next year is going to be polar opposite in a lot of ways, because I can't begin to say this enough. Everything that could have went wrong this year, again, went wrong. There's just no doubting that. Aren't we 5 games under? We're 90. The Mets are currently 73 and 79 on the year. Yeah, they're 8 games out of first. Their playoff hopes are done. They've been done, but they are done. They're not mathematically out yet, but I'm going to go the lengths of saying that they are done. And I think everyone should too at this point. It would take a miracle run for them, and there's been nothing to suggest, and we've been saying that for the past month, there's been nothing to suggest they would go on a miracle run now, because they haven't done it all year long. Even when they had their winning streaks, it was against bad teams, and they couldn't even handle that consistently, because then they split 4-4 for the end of their road trip against both the Nationals and the Marlins a couple weeks ago. Again, that's just been the story of their season. It really has been. What's up, Andre? How's it going? And again, shout out everybody in the chat, guys. Appreciate you guys all being here. A couple things I want to get into now. I want to talk a little briefly, and this is something that I might break down in a separate video, but I still want to do it here just a little bit, and that is Taiwan Walker's second half struggles, okay? Taiwan Walker has been the polar opposite of what he was the first half of this year for the Mets. A Walker who's on that 2-year deal with the Mets, who just surprised everyone, including myself, with playing above expectations in the first half, being one of the best pitchers in all of the NL for that matter, getting himself a first career All-Star appearance, and since then he has been anything but, unfortunately, an All-Star pitcher. Looking at the numbers here, this was originally tweeted out by Anthony DeComo last night after he parted ways after giving up 6 over 2 innings for the Mets yesterday. Taiwan Walker in the first half this year has a 7-3 win-loss record, a 2.66 ERA. Since the second half has started, since his All-Star appearance this year, Walker has yet to record a win. He's 0-7 on the year with a 7.74 ERA. Walker, again, has had a lot of issues in the second half this year. And I believe a lot of things are going in hand as to why that is. I was breaking down a lot of numbers earlier today, going through Baseball Savant, going through Fangraphs, and his usage in certain pitches drastically changed throughout the year, with him heavily favoring his fastball, getting rid of certain other pitches as well that he doesn't feel he has the same comfortability with. So it looks like as Taiwan has ridden more and more on his fastball in the second half, that's been to a lack of success for him, is what I've seen. I've also seen a couple of things of that. One, when the sticky substance breakdown happened, he started to struggle. But even after looking at his RPMs and his average spin rate for his pitches, nothing has dropped drastically all year long. The most that a pitch has dropped is right around 200, but that's normal. That is nothing significant whatsoever. It's when you get into the 350 to the 500 range for the RPMs and differential in a season is where you know that there's something funny happening. So my assumption, I've been saying this for a while now, I think that one thing can be said about Taiwan is that, one, with the sticky substance situation, I'm going to go on a limb and assume that maybe he was using either sunscreen and rosin, just something simple that most pitchers in the league do to help with grip, and he had to adjust from that. I could, of course, be wrong, but that's just an assumption based on how drastically things took a turn for that breakdown. But not just that, I think it really goes in hand with the lack of actual innings pitched Taiwan has had in his career. Let's not forget that this season, pitching in over 150 innings is the most innings Taiwan has pitched in a year since 2017. He has been beyond injury plagued with serious injuries the past couple years. Finally, he was healthy enough and getting ready to get himself back in the rhythm of baseball in the short 2020 year. Looked strong during his time in Seattle, got traded to the Blue Jays and did not give up a run and a handful of starts with them, which made him very appealing heading into free agency. But Taiwan, still in his late 20s now, still another year of control on his contract at least. I expect him to have a better year, a more consistent year next year than what he's had at this point. He is a guy that the Mets are going to have to evaluate on how to properly use him, because he's really more so a back of the rotation star. That's what we've all seen for sure. And even though that he has gotten lucky at times earlier this season, I will say that Taiwan still has plenty of room to grow, and he really just needs to get himself into comfortability. It's obvious that this guy has had a dead arm the second half. He's been unbelievably gassed, and you can't blame him given the workload he's had this year versus years prior. It takes a while for a pitcher to ramp up and get back in the rhythm of things when, again, he hasn't had this kind of workload since 2017. It's 2021, folks. It's been a hot minute. That's numerous years without pitching much of any baseball, significantly at least, going back to 2017 now. So I expect things to adjust for him better in the offseason. There's going to be more broken down on him and how to really hone in, and also just be more balanced in my mind with his pitch distribution. Because if you go through Baseball Savant as well, a breakdown how he just heavily favored his fastball in the second half, and you can clearly see the trend that goes on with that, with heavily favoring his fastball and dropping some of his other secondary pitches, when in reality, he's had common success with them earlier this year. Now, what are the reasons for this? Why doesn't he feel comfortable with certain pitches anymore? I'm not necessarily sure, but you have to assume that there is reasoning as to why in the second half he's just absolutely soared with holding on to his fastball and really betting on it more than anything. Again, that's something that he's not going to have continued success with should he continue down that route, but I'm confident in him that he's going to be able to make the right adjustments heading into the offseason. If the Mets are smart, I wouldn't even pitch him again this year, to be honest with you. Just with them looking like playoffs is definitely not an option. Only 10 games left on the year. Maybe one more outing, but I would not rush Taiwan whatsoever. I would give him the rest that he needs and get him prepped for 2022. I personally think that is most important. I'm not sure what you guys think in the comments here, however, but we also have injury updates I want to share with you guys, because I know that we're really only 10 games left in the year, but there are some significant injury updates, and that comes with a guy like Noah Syndergaard. Noah yesterday, I believe, pitched himself a flawless inning, 1-2-3, shut down the former, guys like Miguel Andujar, former Yankee that's currently in AAA. Shut down 3 right in a row. Had a flawless inning yesterday, and that was replaced by Robert Gazelman, his good buddy, no less, I believe. So Noah's looking good, and he's looking like he could be ready to pitch for the pen, possibly this weekend in the Brewers series. We'll see how much impact, if at all, he'll have for the remainder of the year. Again, Noah has not been throwing his slider, because we all know how that can affect his elbow coming back from Tommy John surgery. They don't want him to throw his slider. They don't want him to throw his curveball. All they want him to throw is strictly fastballs and changeups. So that's what we're going to be gaining for however many outings, if at all, he comes out of the pen down the stretch here in the final 10 games. But Noah, it's good to see him. I personally think it's good for him to at least get at least one outing before the end of the year. That way he can at least see some live batters in the league just for inning or whatever it's going to be. And then head into the offseason, hone in, work on those secondary pitches, get that slider up and going again, get all the off speeds up and going, and then he can be set to hopefully be a factor in the Mets rotation next season. And Jacob deGrom has been continuing to throw, and he said that he does plan to come back this year before the year ends as long as everything progresses. Now, whether Jake only pitches, say, an inning in the final game of the season for the Mets, or whatever his impact is going to be, I can promise you that the Mets are not going to be rushing any of these guys. So between Noah, between deGrom, if they're going to be making an appearance this year, they're doing it because they know it's time for them to at least get some actual live batters here against opposing clubs before the end of the year, see what's working, what's not, and what they can build off of heading into the offseason for the 2022 year. So I'm not one of those people that just believes that, oh, you absolutely need to shut them down. If they're healthy and they're ready to go, I don't think you should shut them down. Just don't push them too far. That's all I'm saying. Give Noah an inning. If DeGrom comes back, give him an inning. Whatever it's going to be. My point is, I'm not against it as long as they don't overstep their boundaries. And the Mets, it's always important to get a look at these guys, two of the biggest names in this rotation heading into next year with the best pitcher in baseball, and Noah Syndergaard, who, let's not forget what Noah can bring to this rotation and what we were hoping to see this year, but unfortunately setbacks had other plans on what he could bring for the Mets in 2022, with the assumption that they come to agreement probably on a qualifying offer, I would say, once the season has finished. So before we get into the final segment, before taking more Q&A, guys, the Brewers series preview, I just want to say shout out to everybody that's first chiming into the Mets talk. We appreciate you guys as I'm breaking down everything there was to know on the quick series recap in Boston, which I was in attendance with the 7 line. Also broke down what happened to Taiwan Walker, what's the reason for his lack of success the second half of the year, what's going right for the Mets, what's not, and what we can kind of get ready for heading into the offseason. Let's see here. A lot more comments, guys. Again, shout out all you guys for being here. I'm going to take a lot of your questions very, very soon, as I mentioned. But let's jump right into now to the Brewers series preview, folks. So Brewers series preview. There really isn't too much to say here. Just given the state of the Mets again, they're 73 and 79. They're facing off against a Brewer Crew team that very well could have a deep run this year. Many people are believing that they could even make the World Series because of just how locked and loaded their rotation is, which is one of the best, if not the best in baseball. Their rotation has been their driving force all year long, and their bullpen, led by Josh Hader, they just have had dominant arms, dominant pitching all year long. And while their offensive success hasn't necessarily been drastic like certain other clubs that will be competing for a deep run in the NL this year, the Brewers definitely have a lot of names that are contributing above expectations to an extent as well. But the first matchup of this series is going to be Friday night tomorrow at the time being live here. It will be Tyler McGill, the rookie who got pushed. He was supposed to pitch in Boston yesterday, but he got pushed to get an extra day's rest. McGill was coming off of a really bad outing. I believe he gave up 6 to 7 runs, only over a couple innings. The rookie has a 4.57 ERA on the year, 3-5 record, facing off against Lauer, who's been really, really good for the Brewers this year, a 6-5 record with a 3.03 ERA. Then getting into game 2 of this series is going to be Rich Hill, Dick Mound, the veteran 41-year-old southpaw, will get on the bump for the Mets this Saturday. And that'll be a 6-7 record for Hill with a 3.87 ERA, who's looked really, really good for the Mets. Again, he's not going deep into games, but he's giving the Mets serviceable 5 to 6 innings every 5th day, and I will gladly take that. Facing off against a potential Cy Young winner coming out of the NL this year, that being Corbin Burns, 10-4 on the year for the right-hander with a 2.34 ERA, just nothing short of dominance. And then game 3, the series finale, is going to be for the Mets. Carlos Carrasco, Cookie, has a 1-3 record on the year with a 5.24 ERA, a much more respectable ERA than what he had earlier this year. Again, being out for the first half of the season and then some, thanks to his hamstring injury, but he's back now. He's getting more in a groove. Again, if he's pitching outside of the first inning, he's been looking pretty good over 5 innings or so for the Mets. Now, facing off against Peralta for the Milwaukee Brewers, who has a 9-5 record and a 2.65 ERA. He has been absolutely killing it this entire rotation. I cannot say enough good things on how much I admire what the Brewers have been doing this year. Just absolutely fantastic. If they're going to go anywhere this year, it's going to be led by their rotation and their overall pitching staff. That has been the biggest demon to beat for any team. You got Brandon Woodruff in there, who the Mets don't even have to face in the series. There's so many factors that go into their success, that being the Brewers, but the pitching is definitely their stronghold, not just now, but going forward into playoffs. But There really isn't anything else to say on this series against the Brewers. After that Brewers series the Mets have, then they have their final homestand of the year, which is against the Miami Marlins. It's a 4-game set. There's a doubleheader in there. I am eyeing to go to the final game at home this year, September 30th. With the 7 line, so we'll see if that holds true. Maybe I'll be able to vlog it. And then the Mets will have their final series of the year in Atlanta against the Braves, who are more than likely going to win the division at this point. So now that we've kind of wrapped up everything there is to know about the Brewers series, again, nothing drastic. If the Mets could somehow, some way squander out a win out of the series, I'll be happy. You know, they're in a spot now where it's a completely different expectation than what it originally was even a month ago. But still, it is what it is. The season is done for the Mets. Now let's just get ready, see how the guys can finish strong in the final 10 games, hopefully, and get ready for what is bound to be a beyond hectic offseason. But now, folks, we're going to get into a bunch of Q&A. That's going to take up the bulk of the remainder of this live stream, this episode of New York Mets Talk. So again, if you're enjoying this episode, whether you're watching this live or on replay, please make sure to smash that like and subscribe on, sharing this video with your friends, upon the notification bell, all those great things. But again, we're going to now get into a Q&A, folks. So if you got comments, questions, or concerns, I'm going to be going through all of them right now. I'm going to start from the top and go from there, and let's see what you guys have to say. So give me 1 second. Yoshima says, especially with how well Cora is managing this year, Beltran might be considered. Yes, if you guys don't know the connection between Cora and Beltran during their time in the Astros, as we know, Beltran was with them during the Chine scandal, was even during parts of scandal with the Yankees, but Cora was one of the bench coaches at the time with the Astros before coming in as full-time manager of the Red Sox, and then he was suspended this past year because of the Astros situation and with the Red Sox, but no less. Cora is a fantastic manager. He's one of the best minds in the game. He's definitely a guy you can look up to and idolize on how well he manages the game with a roster that isn't drastically different for the Red Sox than what it was in the short 2020 year. And this team is bound to make playoffs, and for their sake, hopefully have a deep run, right? But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Beltran ties into things for sure. Austin Riley is not a free agent now. As a Yankees fan, what happened to the Mets? I really thought that they would be a ton better. Again, there's so much I can get into, but in a nutshell, just as I said already, everything that could have went wrong for the Mets went wrong this year. Like I said, they've had more injuries than any other team in baseball this year, and they've had some poor decisions managerially. They've had some front office issues when it comes to consistency with their GM to an extent. Again, they've had replacements be in the position that control the Mets and their fate right now, so that definitely doesn't help things. But also, losing Jacob deGrom in the second half, losing Francisco Lindor, how long the Mets did, really hurt them as they were starting to get on a roll halfway through the year. And it's just been a downward spiral since then. They've had like one of, if not the worst plate approach in all of baseball, with runners in scoring position. And you can't just blame the players. You have to blame the manager. You have to blame everyone. But there's been a systematic problem for the Mets on getting over the hump. They've had more one-run games than any other team in baseball. They've had more one-run losses than any other team in baseball. So they battled games left and right all year long, but they have not been able to show that X factor on a consistent basis to get them where they need to be. And that is to be in a position to make playoffs. And they're not going to be doing that this year. Brand says, do I believe the Mets will think about trading Walker to sign Barrios or a star pitcher because he's been terrible? No, the Mets are not. I doubt the Mets are going to trade Walker. I think Walker's going to have a better year than what he's had this year in the second half. I think there's still plenty of upside with Taiwan, and I believe that the Mets are going to be in a spot where they don't have to necessarily bank on Taiwan to be that go-to guy, but at most he's going to be their fifth starter in the rotation, which is a comfortable thing, knowing that your rotation will be deep enough where you don't have to bet on Taiwan. Just hope that he gives you his best every fifth day as the fifth starter, though. Barrios is not a free agent at the end of the year. Just so you know, he has a year of arbitration left before he becomes a free agent. So he's probably going to resign on a nice contract with the Blue Jays. So yeah, Barrios is not heading free agency. He'll be settling on a deal in arbitration, I'm sure. Going down farther here, Robbie Ray is someone I'd love the Mets to go after, but Jays may. Yeah, that's a thing about Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray would be perfect for the Mets in this rotation, in my mind, to bring a dominant southpaw, something they have not had consistently all year long. They tried it with David Pearson earlier this year, and we all know how that went. They tried it with Joey Lucchesi, but Joey just, between his Tommy John surgery, now isn't even an option for a while, but two was inconsistent. And now you have Robbie Ray, who is basically having a Cy Young year coming out of the AL. The Blue Jays would have to be downright foolish to part ways with him. If I'm the Blue Jays, I am prioritizing number one, making sure you lock up guys like Robbie Ray. You need to make sure you have stability in that rotation, also in that bullpen, because the offense is the least of your problems. If I'm the Blue Jays, I even prioritize Robbie Ray to a certain extent over Marcus Semien. If you can land both, keep both in great, but Robbie Ray is a guy that you cannot part ways with, given the year he's had, and they need him. That's their ace. It's not Hyun-Jin Ryu. He's had an up and down year and dealt with injury, especially after the sticky substance situation. So yeah, Robbie Ray's their guy. They need to make sure they lock him up. I do not. I will be pretty surprised if Robbie Ray is available in free agency. If the Blue Jays are smart, they should not part ways with him and make sure they can lock him up. I would back the house up for Theo and give him a 3% of the Mets if that's what it takes. Yeah, Theo's going to be he's a very hot commodity, as we know. It's between Theo, it's between Stearns, who's the president of baseball operations for the Brewers, who actually grew up a diehard Mets fan, no less, and used to work in the Mets organization. The Mets were not able to talk to him, however, this past offseason because the Brewers wouldn't allow it. Again, it's tough to try to get the right hires in when organizations don't allow you to even have these discussions with their young, bright-minded executives. So we'll see that changes this offseason. But Theo, what might make him more realistic than anyone else is the fact that you don't have to ask a team for approval to speak to him. The Mets can go to him directly. A couple of things that are just in the way of potentially getting Theo is, one, how much interest does he have from the Mets at this point in time? How much ownership, assuming you're going to have to give up a minority stake in ownership, how much do you have to give up for a guy like him? Also, what kind of dollars he's exactly looking for, knowing that the Mets, of course, can afford it, but we have to figure out what kind of deal. And two, what is his plan to be president of baseball ops? And then, of course, who is he going to put in as GM? Because assumingly it's going to be not him. It's going to probably be someone below him, unless he really wants to run the show with both. But again, I think it's smart for the Mets to have people ingrained in all aspects of not just president of baseball ops, but a GM, a manager, everything's separate. I think that helps lead a team to success. But yeah, Theo's definitely an option. I would love him. I would love either of those three, Theo, Bean, or Stearns. If the Mets find themselves landing with any of these guys come the offseason, I will be absolutely feeling electric. And I'm sure many of you guys would too. So I think Austin Riley wins the Silver Slugger for third base. Nolan has 2 more homers, but is batting .302 compared to Nolan's Arenado. Personally, I think that Austin is deserving. If we're talking about third baseman in the NL, Nolan has been killing it. He has right around 100 RBIs if he didn't crack that already. It's one of those things where I'm not sure exactly how much they prioritize home runs. Like if, say, Nolan just wins, edges out Austin by a couple more home runs, then maybe. But it's tough because if we're talking strictly Silver Slugger, Austin Riley's been an absolute beauty all year long for the Braves. One of the most underrated and underappreciated players in the league. So in my mind, he's definitely deserving of some hardware if he continues this trend. I just could not bring myself to go to last night's game. I head home hoping they give me a reason to regret not going. Pete's really the only one thing worth watching right now. Oh, Seth. Yeah, I know. It's definitely not been fun. It's definitely not fun watching the Mets every day. I've been struggling with it for sure. I'm going to be missing the bulk of games this weekend because I'll be out of town again, so there won't be in-game live streams. But, this is the final 10 games for the Mets this year, so all I care about just watching them is the hope that they can get some fire under their butt to just end the year strong. We haven't seen any of it to this point. You hope that it starts at some before it's too late, if you will, just so the Mets can at least end the season on a good note and be looking forward to something heading into the offseason. Maybe a little stretch they build off of. Just give us a better idea as what we're working with heading into the offseason. I think would be definitely feasible in my mind. How do you settle Peterson and McGill in the rotation? Yoshima, to be quite honest with you, I don't think either of them are going to be in the rotation for the Mets next year. I think the Mets are going to make enough moves potentially where they're not going to bet on either of them, but it's going to be a scenario like going into the year where they had Lucchesi, where would he fit? They had Jordan Yamamoto as like another option, like, their 7th potential spot in the rotation. I think the Mets are going to get very creative, but it's going to be curious who battles it out. But I'm not betting on either of those two young pitchers to be a lock in the rotation. I think the Mets are going to do plenty to make sure that they have stability, and that way they can use these guys as either long relievers, maybe have one or the other as part of a bigger deal that will land them a significant player via trade or whatever it's going to be. But yeah, personally, I'm not betting on either of them to be a lock in the rotation as of now. They're going to battle, but something tells me that maybe even one of them are going to be parted ways with as part of a bigger deal. We'll see. You know what Epstein would do? Treat everybody at value in the minors to get veterans. Gerald, I disagree with that notion, mainly because the Mets won't allow it. Steve Cohen won't allow that to happen. And Mets actually have money that they can consistently work with. So while I do think that there are certain prospects that will be traded in the years going forward for the Mets, I do not think that this will be a Brody Van Wagenen situation, or if Epstein comes in as president of baseball operations, that anyone and everyone in the minors that you could think of as being traded away. I do not see that happening. While there is a desperation for the Mets to win it all for sure, the Mets have the payroll and the comfortability that they can work with going forward that Theo didn't necessarily have to the same extent in years prior. Like the Mets, I don't see the Mets train away their entire farms to bring in veterans, but if they are going to be training away their young assets, rest assured it's going to be for good reason, for guys that are going to be controllable and make sense for the roster, not just now, but for years going forward. But again, I do not see the Mets, unleashing the farm to the extent that I think you might be insinuating. Am I confident the Mets re-sign Stroman? To a certain extent, to be honest with you, I'm confident in my belief that I think the Mets should. I have my natural concerns with Stroh when it comes to free agency, and this will be being a dead horse I'll be talking about a lot heading into the offseason. But Stroman, he's a guy that's faced a lot of adversity. He's a lot of people doubt him. I'm not sure what his comfortability level is with the Mets right now in the organization, and I think he's going to go to the highest bidder. And I think that it doesn't really matter who that bidder is going to be. I think he's going to go where, they throw him the bag, and rightfully so, given how great of a year he's had after betting on himself on that qualifying offer. So personally, I think the Mets can definitely afford him. They should 100% prioritize him to make sure that he does not go anywhere. But would I be surprised if Marcus Stroman maybe went out LA to the Angels because the Angels finally got a piece and they went all in on him? No, I wouldn't be surprised by that. So I just hope the Mets prioritize him and give him the money he's deservingly so should be getting. The only exception in my mind that would make sense for not bringing Marcus Stroman back from the Mets side of things is if they make trades potentially for a young, controllable asset of a starter that would fill his replacement younger and with a brighter future. That's the only thing that could really suggest and make me be on board with it, because as of now, I'm not. You need to make sure you prioritize Stroman in every which way possible and go from there. So I really hope the Mets can lock him up for sure. What's the biggest position of concern to address this offseason, says Trevor? Biggest position of concern, you can almost make you can almost say the rotation to a certain extent just because all the injuries they've had this year. But with assuming that DeGrom comes back, he's fully healthy, he's ready to go. Assuming that Noah comes back and he actually makes an impact in this rotation once again next year, I'm probably going to favor, one of third base or the corner outfield. The same thing that the Mets have reportedly have been planning to address this offseason. Hence, that's exactly what they were doing last offseason, but just couldn't get enough done, if you will, because a lot of things, unfortunately, are easier said than done when it comes to making constant moves. So I almost think third base, just because the Mets have not been good defensively all year at third base, they needed stability there in that position. Even if it's a guy that's playing his off position there, I just want someone that's going to be stable there, can play that effectively defense, at least average, if not above average for sure, and just be there every day. That's what I want from the Mets. And corner outfield, it's going to be very different with the assumption that the Mets have a DH this offseason. That, in my mind, is going to be a game changer, if you will, an X factor. So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, naturally, third base, corner outfield is what I think will be very important for the Mets. Isaac says everything depends on Thor. If he comes back and he's dominant, then that changes things for us. If he isn't, then we need another pitcher. DeGrom, Stroman, Thor could be dominant 3. I agree, Isaac. I believe the Mets are going to go into the offseason with the assumption that they can't bank on Noah, not knowing what you're getting with him. And I hope that's the route they go down and have a logjam, endless options, if you will, a good problem to have. Or if Thor comes back and he works his way in the rotation and he's dominant again, great. But I really hope the Mets make sure that they have enough depth that they aren't reliant on it, because you can't be reliant on someone that hasn't proven himself since his Tommy John surgery now if he's going to be lights out again in this rotation. The Mets need to act accordingly as if they don't have him, and then you're going to have him, obviously, assuming you get him on that qualifying offer in the offseason or whatever it's going to be, and hope the best for him that he can work himself back in this rotation and be an every fifth day starter. Last night was rough, Jeremy. Yeah, that's an understatement, buddy. I think both corner outfield spots need to be upgraded. Those are our biggest weaknesses. We can have a stopgap at third base until Beatty or Vientos are ready next year. Yeah, I mean, I will say, though, Vientos, I do expect to make his debut at some point next year. And Beatty, I don't think is going to make his debut next year. Just remember, when it comes to prospects, here's my stance. I love a lot of the young Mets prospects for sure, but the Mets are not going to act when it comes to trades and free agency to a certain extent that those prospects will be an X factor in decision making when it comes to them being called up, okay? The Mets cannot have themselves betting on everything, on these young prospects that, Brett Baty, Vientos, that's a future at their base. That might be true, but the Mets cannot act as if they are going to come in right away and be dominant. That's something they cannot do. They want to have continued success. This is a team in a win-now stage. They need to make sure that they address these positions that need to be addressed going in the offseason. And then once these prospects rise and blossom, figure out what you're going to do with them. Either have them potentially playing in opposition. If you need them to, have them in DH, or even potentially have them as part of a trade in which you acquire a prospect that is a position of need for the Mets, or have them as part of a trade for a bigger name position player or pitcher, reliever, whatever it's going to be to help give the Mets continued success. Because again, I love a lot of these prospects, and I do expect a lot of them to be making impacts for the Mets. But to suggest that the Mets are not going to do anything significant over the next year or so in a certain position because they're waiting on them is foolish in my mind. I think the Mets are going to have a completely opposite mindset. They need to address this team as if the prospects are not a factor, because you can't weigh them as one when there is zero certainty on when they'll be caught up and what they will bring you once they are caught up, if at all. What are some free agent pitchers after the season? There's a bunch. Outside of Robbie Ray, Carlos Rodon is the most. Carlos Rodon and Kevin Gausman are the two enticing ones for sure. Gausman being from the Giants, Rodon, the Southpaw, being from the White Sox. Those are guys I'm sure the Mets will be ingrained with. Something tells me that they might actually be more ingrained in the trade market when it comes to landing pitchers and not so much for agency, but they're going to weigh all their options like they did last offseason. Those are just some names. Max Scherzer's the top of the list, a veteran, but I don't expect Scherzer to leave LA. Clayton Kershaw's a free agent. I don't expect Kershaw to leave LA either. So I'm really not even putting those guys in the equation until proven otherwise. So realistic guys that potentially could land on different teams, in my mind, are Robbie Ray to a certain extent, but Toronto should lock him up. Gausman, Giants, they'll see if they can lock him up. Carlos Rodon, which I don't know why the White Sox would part ways with, but Rodon, if he does part ways, I fully expect the Mets to be in on him too. There are some good names for pitching-wise, just not as deep pitching market as the infield market this free agency. Sign Correa for third or sign Bryant for third, but also has a versatility play all over. When Beatty, Vientos, or Ray, you still have the flexibility with DH potentially. Keep those bats in lineup. My point exactly, Jordan. That's kind of what I'm alluding to. Don't worry about the prospects. Just wait for them to rise. Once they're here, we'll figure out what we're going to do with them. But it's important to make sure that at least you're not blocking their position with a veteran that is already towards, the latter half of his prime. If the Mets are going to block those positions, I'm in favor of a Correa, like a Bryant, especially Carlos Correa. He's 26, 27 years old. You could literally lock him up on upwards of an 8-year to a 10-year deal, and that still won't be a bad contract on paper. Given what he's done at this point, what he can do for you going into his mid to late 30s, So it's gonna be interesting how everything plays out. But I'm glad he brought those names up because those are guys we're going to be discussing on the channel very soon. What's the deal with VR? Base running has been terrible at times. Yeah, Ray, VR struggled with it in the past, but I'm really not going to put too much stock in VR's base running woes because he's one of the few players like Javi Baez, who does get caught on the bases too, that are aggressive. The Mets need more aggressiveness in their lineup. They are still, again, one of the worst teams with stolen bases in the league. They are not good. They need to have better speed on the bags. They need to be aggressive, but they just need to be better with the situational aggressiveness. Let me put it that way. They need to make sure they're aggressive, but at the right times. I hope you understand my gist there. But I think VR has been a godsend for the Mets at times this year, given all the injuries and the lack of consistencies, even at third base. And VR is not a third baseman by any means, but he's held it down when the Mets have needed him plenty this year, and I appreciate that from him. Thomas, great member on the channel. Happy to have you back, my man. I hope you're doing well. Are they going to resign Conforto? We'll see. We'll see. I think that's a very up-in-the-air situation still, and we'll be getting into that plenty in the next month. Christian, I'm doing great, my man. How are you? Thank you so much for chiming in. So I think if the Mets don't side Stroman, that he ends up in Toronto again. That's a good question. I don't think so, just because of how he parted ways in Toronto. It definitely feel like that that relationship soured. Not so much that he doesn't love and appreciate Toronto. He absolutely does. But, he didn't want to leave Toronto. And that he made that kind of obvious when he was traded away. So I don't think that relationship is going to connect again. Anyone in the minors you would love to see next year? I want Alvarez and Vientos. Alvarez won't be with the Mets for at least another year, probably 2. Vientos I would love to see because I think he's actually the most realistic. Vientos is going to start the year in AAA next year. He's been soaring through the minors this past season. He's a guy that makes a lot of sense that could find himself making his debut either to begin the season with the Mets, either off the bench or possibly in a DH spot, or at some point throughout the year, maybe gain into when they have the additional rosters next September, and the assumption the Mets are going to run and make playoffs, right? Why are the Mets all of a sudden plugging in DHs in the starting lineup? Where was this during the season when it mattered? DH is when you're in the AL. Mets just played 2 games in Boston. That's the AL, which means they have a DH. That's why. The Mets only had a DH this year when they're in the American League for a game. So they should have it universally next season and beyond, but that's why they had a DH the past 2 games, because they were in Boston. That's the only reason why. All right, pardon me, guys. Just read more of your questions here. Again, shout out to everybody that's chiming in for this episode of New York Mets Talk. If you're enjoying it, as we're breaking down questions, obviously about the offseason, because I'm assuming that's what everyone's going to be talking about. We'll be doing endless live streams, endless content in the offseason regarding everything there is to know about the Mets, what they potentially do here with the roster, who they should sign, who they should part ways with, currently on the team, and also who they should sign in free agency that are not on the team and who they should potentially trade for. If you guys are enjoying it, no less, please make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Help us get to 70 likes by the end of the stream at some point. 100 would also be awesome. So again, just thank you so much for the support, guys. Going through more comments here. Offense. What do you think we will do? I think we'll do a lot, Anthony, in a nutshell. I can't guarantee you exactly what we're going to do, but I can tell you that the Mets are going to do a lot of what they were intending on doing last offseason, and this time actually having things structured with a proper upper management to do so. If the Mets don't sign Baez, any chance they will give second to Mauricio? Potentially, but that wouldn't be for a while still. Mauricio is not making his MLB debut next year. He's still at least a year away, probably, a year and a half at least. So I don't see that being realistic, at least for the now. Thomas with the $10 donation. Thank you so much. Hype in the chat for Thomas with the $10 dono, folks. We appreciate that. Glad to be back. Just got over what I believe was another round of COVID. Oh, no. Hope you're feeling better, Thomas. That absolutely sucks. Excited for this offseason. Hopefully we land Billy Bean and Bob Melvin. Counting down the days to see Rojas leave. LFGM. Appreciate the donation. Everyone, hype in the chat for Thomas. Hoping that he's feeling better, too, from getting sick. That absolutely sucks, buddy. But again, appreciate the donation. I hope you're doing better now, my man. And yes, we're all excited and getting ready for the offseason. That's an understatement. And what's up, Asia? Great member on the channel. If we have a 2022 off season, no guarantee. It's funny you say that. Again, there is no guarantee for sure, but something tells me that even in a situation where there is a holdout because of the CBA agreement coming this winter, I do think we're still going to have a season. If anything, I think it might just get pushed a little bit, but I'm really hoping that there's no holdout. That would absolutely suck. Do I like Starling Marte? Yes, I do. Love Starling Marte. He's been killing it for the Oakland A's. And I do believe the Mets will be tagged in on him come free agency. Whether they land him or not, it's a different story, but we all know how the Mets work now. They're going to be keeping tabs on all these guys. And in this scenario as well, keep this in mind, where the Mets potentially have Billy Bean and or Bob Melvin next year in management and the actual normal manager for the Mets. If that comes into fruition, that's going to benefit the Mets with someone like Starling Marte to a certain extent. Knowing at least that Bob Melvin, his connection with Marte right now, how good is it? As long as it's good, that can entice Marte to come in to help out the outfield, potentially move Nimmo to left in my mind. That would be nice, and potentially figure out Billy Beane's connection there too. It's not a bad idea, and I do expect the Mets to be interested. If DH happens, who plays first? It's all going to vary on what the Mets do this offseason. If that's going to stay with the Alonso at first, maybe Dom at DH. If Dom is traded, who's going to be at DH? If the Mets acquire a first baseman that's more defensively reliable than Pete, then Pete goes at DH and that first baseman goes on first. Again, there's all these different ways the Mets can go about it. It's really hard to nitpick what exact player could be because it can be many. I did see the question between keeping McNeil and Dom. Personally, I love both. I really do. It's what's most difficult about the McNeil and Dom debate right now is McNeil is bound to have a bounce back year next year. And I don't think we should put stock in McNeil having an off year, one, because he was out for 5 weeks with injury, but also because he's been under a system that's been so poor. The Mets have had a huge systematic problem with runners in scoring position this year. How much different is it going to look, assuming they have a different manager? Maybe a guy with more experience like a Bob Melvin, just as an example, is currently with the Oakland A's. Jeff McNeil has been one of the best hitters in all baseball consistently. Let's not put stock into him having one down year, okay? I really believe that Jeff, I think the biggest factor with Jeff with staying with the Mets or not personally is going to be where do you put him, okay? If the Mets re-sign Baez, that's your second baseman every day for the future. If the Mets sign a big-name third baseman or a guy that can play third base, okay, then McNeil isn't an option at third either. All that Jeff has going for him then is potentially corner outfield that I'm sure will get addressed with more defensively reliable players. And then you have the DH potentially. But are you going to put Jeff McNeil, a guy who is a great utility player and a guy who isn't known for popping his bat, but more so known just for being a contact king, as your DH every day? That's something I don't feel confident in, and I'm not sure the Mets do either. But I do think that there is more reasons to suggest that McNeil is more viable than Dom, given his versatility and given how more consistent he's been reliable throughout his career. I love them both, but again, I'm really curious to see how the Mets are going to go about McNeil and Dom, especially Jeff, because he very well could find himself blocked with no position to handle, and that might be his downfall with potentially being traded. Again, I don't hope that McNeil gets traded, but again, let's be realistic here. Jeff McNeil, normal Jeff McNeil, is one of the best and most consistent hitters in baseball. It can be easy to overlook that in a rough year that has been for Jeff, but he's been unbelievably streaky this year. If he gets consistent and we can see what we've seen in years past, then man, I want Jeff McNeil on my team. I really do. I don't know exactly what we would need to get to offer Marcus. What would we need to offer Marcus Semien or Stroman, Ron? Answer that for me. Are you talking about Semien or Stroman? Any updates on the Mets' interest in Billy Beane? Nothing further than what we've discussed on the channel, what's been reported out there. Nothing drastic since then. Who's worse, Boone or Rojas? You could definitely make the argument for Boone. You definitely could. It's hard for me from a Mets side of things to say, worse than Rojas. I don't think Rojas is at fault for everything this year, however, too. But again, how much impact has Rojas had in the Mets' lack of offensive success this year? That is really the X factor. So I'm not really going to answer that, but I'll let the chat answer it for me. How about that? We'll do that instead. Let me know in the chat, guys, who you think has had a worse year managerial-wise, Rojas or Boone. Do I think McGill's in the rotation next year, Miss K? Personally, I don't. I think the Mets might have him competing, but I don't think that they're going to have him for a lock as a rotation. I think he'll either be competing on the outside looking in, or he will be in a position where he's either used as a long reliever, traded as part of a bigger deal. I would not be sold on the notion that McGill is a lock to be in the rotation next year. Do you think it's a foregone conclusion that Rojas will be let go? I just think Rojas won't be extended. His contract expires at the end of the year, and I don't think the Mets will be picking it up. Are the Mets planning to do a major overhaul with the bullpen? I haven't seen anything to suggest a major overhaul, but I do believe that they're going to upgrade it for sure. I don't think that they're going to, overhaul it in the sense of changing everything about it. I think there's going to be a lot of guys coming back, but with some expiring contracts, including Jeurys Familia, I do expect the bullpen to be better next year than what it has been to this point this year, which again hasn't been terrible, but you've also seen a lack of urgency and a lack of consistency with managing the bullpen toward down the stretch here this season. I did watch the 30 for 30, Jason. It was amazing on the Mets and their 86 run. Do I think the Dodgers have a chance to win the division? Let me double check real quick where LA is in the division. I'm sure they're still right out of it. Dodgers are 2 back. I think the Dodgers definitely can, but I think the Giants are going to win it. I do. Giants have been the better team all year long. It's hard for me to think that these last stretch of games will be a game changer, but San Fran's a team to beat right now. They really are. It's hard to choose someone over them. As great as the Dodgers are, wouldn't surprise me if the Dodgers come in and win the division in the end. But I'm favoring the guys that are in first right now, and that's the Giants, best team in baseball. Is Kimbrel a free agent? I believe he has at least another year on his contract. I could be wrong, however. You know what? I think, is Kimbrel a free agent? He might be. Why do I think he has another year? You might be right. Something tells me that he does have another year. Okay, there's a club option after this season for Kimbrel, so he'll be back with the White Sox as long as they don't pick up the as long as they don't part ways with him because they have the club option. So the White Sox are in control of his fate, not him. With that being said, folks, we are going to get wrapping up here with this episode of New York Mets Talk. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this extended Q&A as well. Would I trade Don McNeil and JD for Soto? I wouldn't even second guess it, Christian, but the Nationals wouldn't even pick up the phone. I promise you that. I promise you that one. Yeah, that wouldn't happen. I don't think Bobby V is going to come back as manager for the Mets. I think those days are done. Regardless on him running for mayor right now in Connecticut. Yeah, I don't see that happening personally. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode of New York Mets Talk. Again, thank you all so much for chiming in. Being Theo or Stearns, any of the three, Subway to Shea, I'd be more than satisfied with personally. I don't have a heavy preference of one over the other, which makes it more comfortable for me. It really does. But that's going to wrap up this one, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Again, hit all those buttons as always. Hope you guys enjoyed. Again, we will be having more content on the channel, individual videos coming very soon, potentially even tomorrow. And then we're going to have live streams again going up to start next week. And then more individual video content live streams heading into the offseason as the Mets are going to round out the season with only 10 games left. So again, thank you so much, guys. Hope you enjoy this one. Help us get us 70, 100 likes, whatever it's going to be if you're watching this live or on replay. And stay tuned for more great Mets content. As always, I'll talk to you guys again soon. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Peace.